wanted to say thank you to everyone up front for making the trip to Hayes. We hope that you had an enjoyable time getting to network and get to know your colleagues that you traveled with, maybe better than what you knew them before. And I do want to introduce our Vice President for Student Affairs, Dr. Joey Lynn, and he's going to welcome you to Hayes.
Good morning. On behalf of President Martin, the faculty, staff, and administration of Fort Hayes, it's 65 and beautiful in Hayes all year round. Right? Thank you all for attending. Patty reminded me that about every 7 years or so, this conference comes to Hayes American. We really want to open up our arms and roll out the red carpet for all of you. Just like in all your campuses, a lot of exciting things happening on our campus. Regarding what you do each and every day, talking about allies. You all know more than anybody, our students are coming to the table each and every semester, each and every year with more and more on their plate. That means we have to, what we did 20 years ago does not work with what we do today. And I have the luxury of teaching a freshman seminar class every year. When I was hired in this position, one of the people asked me, how are you going to feel about, if you're the VP, how do you feel about not being able to teach freshman seminar again? And I said, if I can't teach freshman seminar, hire someone else. Because that's the way I can keep the heartbeat of the freshmen in front of me and talk to them and get the true feedback of what's happening in the residence halls on campus with their advisors and everything else. And believe me, my 27 students in my class are honest, and they're not afraid to tell me how life is fourth week of classes here. But again, a lot of topics that come up every year I teach this is advising. And we all know the importance of advising. One of the exciting things that's happening at Fort Hays State, Dr. Griffin led a committee that's going to be talking to President Martin and our executive leadership team on Monday about potentially a new model of advising at Fort Hays State University that we're looking forward to seeing what that report looks like. So we're looking at shifting our model, hopefully for the better, and how we can affect students and get them to the finish line, which is what it's all about. So as we know, we all getting, I will say, heat from Topeka about enrollments. It's about 20 a day right now. Everybody's whispering at the board level and at presidential levels of who's up, who's down. But more importantly, they're trying to, at least talking about tying money and funding to retention and graduation rates, which to me, the real difference makers are the advising people, because that's who students count on, and that's who we trust and believe in to get them to the finish line. So I know I'm singing to the choir, but at Fort Hays State University under the leadership of Dr. Griffin, we're moving and shaking, and I can't wait to hear the report on Monday along with our team to see what we're going to be doing as we go forward. I will say this, we are planning something very exciting, very new that I can release to all of you. We're going to be building a brand new Student Success Center in the future. And part of our Success Center, which will be tied into the Memorial Union, is going to have a second floor walkway into the Union. We're going to have extended evening hours. We're going to move this advising network, our Success Center, tutoring, everything into this advising Success Center. We're also going to incorporate some sort of wellness initiative into the Success Center, along with, educating students and making sure they're doing the right things academically. We want to change the culture of health as well when we talk about being successful. So we're in the design phases of this 3-story addition to the Union, but it's going to be a difference maker at Fort Hays when it comes to advising, when it comes to the success of our students. So that's something we're all looking forward to here. So without further ado, welcome to campus. Make sure you have a chance to look around this beautiful place, and I look forward to hearing how the rest of the day goes and hopefully meeting some of you. Have a great day.
So I have to tell you a little joke. So I asked Joey, Joey and I started our undergrad together in 1983 at Fort Hays, which you might all find very amusing. We have just not aged much at all. But I said, so what do you want me to call you? Do you want me to call you Dr. Joey Lynn? Do you want me to call you Joseph Clint? He said, you can call me whatever I want. And I thought, really? He's my new boss, so I had to think about that, but that might be. So thank you, Joey. So I just wanted to give you a couple of heads up things, because as funny as it is, on your program, on the back of your program, there's information about our social media, but I wanted to give you 2 other things. So if you are tweeting, you can tweet us at Kansas Advising, and the hashtag for today is hashtag 2015. Just so that you have that through the day if you're wanting to use that. So our conference is all about being allies and what we do every day with our students. And so when we were thinking out about the program and what would actually connect with that, I think there's a lot of times that we hear from the regular people that have bigger offices on our campus that tell us things in regards to how it can make an impact for us. But today we wanted to make sure to maybe stretch what we've done, and I know as a member of CAN since 1996, that thinking about all the keynotes and different things that we've done, we have never had a keynote at CAN that actually talked about different abilities in regards to our students and what does disability look like. And this is the 25th anniversary of the American Disabilities Act, so if you weren't aware of that, that actually, so in July 26, 1990 was when that act was actually signed. And so today we have Dr. Karen Myers. She is the co-founder and director of the Ability Inclusion Project, which includes an exhibit. It also includes ally training, and we had some people participate in that last night to look at things for a different way. And I did say, so any of you who were at that training last night, you came and you picked up your name tag this morning and you looked at the program, I did not have ally training before I did these two things. So I want to make that very clear that they are not necessarily accessible to all students. And so I apologize if I have excluded anyone that this does not work for them today. But I would like to welcome Dr. Karen Myers to the stage, and she's going to share with us about her project and what's actually going on for her. And at the end, we will have an opportunity for you to ask questions of Dr. Myers. So, you know, please think about that as she's speaking us today. So please welcome Dr. Karen Myers.
Good morning. It was 1991. I was an academic advisor for undecided students, and that's what we called them then, undecided students, and students with disabilities at a public institution. One day, a non-traditional transfer student came into my office, and we will call him Jack. So Jack told me that he was HIV positive. Most of his friends who had HIV positive at one time, or who had full-blown AIDS, and many of them had died or were dying. He wanted to come back to college and try to finish his education. However, he knew he wouldn't have much time. And at that point, as you can imagine, he was angry and frustrated at his life and at the system. So we talked about the disability process. I was director of disability services at the time and also an academic advisor. And so we talked about the process, and I know you're very familiar with the process that a student must disclose and a student must provide documentation. We verify the documentation. Then we, at that time, sent out letters to faculty telling them about the accommodations. And then it was up to the student to be the self-advocate. Well, Jack was becoming very frustrated because he didn't know when he wanted the faculty just to know what he needed. And given the specific accommodations, faculty didn't quite understand. Obviously, you don't say what the disability is, but you do provide the accommodations. So, if you think about it, with HIV, it was really the other disabilities that required the accommodations, the other issues that he encountered. So, such as his learning, he had difficulty learning, completing tests, being attentive. He had colds and infections. He had issues attending class because if he got sick, then he couldn't attend class. And the faculty, his teachers, did not understand. and he was not sure how to go about it. He would come to me and say, should I tell them? What should I do? Obviously, again, very distraught. So I heard from Jack almost weekly for 2.5 years. So obviously he was still alive. And he took care of himself at that time. He was very attentive to his diet and to supplements and trying everything. He would give me books and magazines on HIV positive, and so I knew a little more about what he should be doing. So anyway, Jack is still alive, or was still alive at that time. He could still be alive today. And he got his bachelor's degree. And so then he came to me, and as a true, good academic advisor, I said, have you thought about a master's? And so he did, and so then he continued on and was working on his master's, and I believe got his master's. At that time, I did move on. I went to another university, and we did not keep in touch. However, I think it's very interesting how quickly life changes and how many of you have experienced student illness, student death, and in this case, student life. As a result of these life changes, our work changes. Our advice, our academic advising practices change, and we change. At every presentation, I ask 2 questions of the audience. One is, do you know someone with a disability? What does that look like to you? When you think about disability, a lot of us think of physical access because the international symbol is a wheelchair. So I think a lot of times we think, do we have students on our campus with disabilities? Well, now the number is growing, and the number of students with other types of disabilities is growing. So learning disabilities, attention deficit disorders, psychological disabilities. Now with the veterans coming back, post-traumatic stress disorder. So a lot of it's shifting, though there are students with physical disabilities. There are also a lot of students with other cognitive and health issues as well. So anyway, I'd like you to think about someone, maybe in your family, a friend, a student, who does have some type of disability. According to the Americans with Disabilities Act, the definition of disability is a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits a major life activity. So if you think physical or mental impairment, major life activity. What is a major life activity? Not only is it mobility or sensory conditions such as a visual disability or hearing or speech, but other things such as learning, breathing, walking, talking, all types and health issues and cognitive issues as well. So the reason I ask you if you know someone is so that you can think about, do you know someone, and keep that person in mind as we continue talking. The other question is, have you excluded anyone? Today, this week, last month? Have we excluded anyone? And I include me in that. I always have to think about that. Because if I think about, have I included anyone, most of us would say, sure, or at least we try. We give it a good try. We don't want to not include people. But when you think of exclusion, then you need to think about everything you do, your practices, your services, your programs, your events, your brochures, your websites. Have we excluded anyone from the table at any moment? Whether it's a student, whether it's in a meeting that you have. And, what does exclusion mean then? And how can we improve that to include everyone? So please think of those 2 questions as we move forward. People do amazing things, and people achieve amazing goals. When they do amazing things and accomplish these achievements, we tend to call them successful. Are you successful? I'm sure there are many achievers in this room. I know advisors. And many would say some of us are overachievers. I know I'm a Virgo, and we all know what that means. So, what is success to you? According to Deepak Chopra, physician of holistic health and alternative medicine, success is what makes you happy. Get in touch with the greater good inside you, and you will have success. Find happiness first, and then success will follow. Ellen DeGeneres talks about success. She talks about the success of her grandmother. She said, "My grandmother has been walking 5 miles a day since she was 60. She's 97. And we don't know where the heck she is." As successful people, we talk about achieving competencies in student affairs, higher education, academic advising. We work hard to develop professional competencies, multicultural competencies, leadership competencies. As academic advisors, you use the CAS standards with student learning outcomes, using competency-based models, developmental advising with Student Development Theory Foundation. As a person with a disability and as a disability educator, I am interested in pursuing disability competencies and disability humility. These terms were new to me back in 2008 when I read an article by Rob McGinnis. And he talked about these disability competencies and disability humility based on cultural competencies and then cultural humility. So we learn about cultures. We learn to understand the different issues, etiquette, etc. of cultures. And the humility piece of that is when we reflect on our own biases. Well, with disability competency, that is when we are well-versed in disability issues, accommodations, types of disabilities, and the laws. And I see disability competency as really following the letter of the law. However, if we have disability humility, that is when we empower and support others to interact with people with disabilities, with inquisitiveness and an open mind. And if we have disability humility, I think that's taking us then into living the spirit of the law. So this morning I'd like to share with you ways in which you can achieve disability competency and disability humility, moving yourself beyond the letter of the law to living the spirit of the law. What I call moving from success to significance. As I said, actually now I'm not only a former academic advisor, but I'm a current academic advisor for graduate students and formerly for undergraduate students. And we all work with people with disabilities. Some of us in this room have disabilities. I know I, myself, mentioned I have a disability. I am legally blind. I have extremely low vision. That's why I wear the dark glasses. I'm extremely light sensitive and need magnification for my work here, for anything that I'm looking at. I brought up a very big book with many, many pages, and it always scares audiences because they think we're going to be here for 6 hours. But actually, it's all 22-point Arial bold, and they're about 2 or 3 words a page. So you can calm down. I promise I'll get you out of here. But I would like to tell you just a little bit about my own story so you know where I'm coming from as a disability educator and trying to move into disability humility, and also a proponent of being an ally. So I am, as I said, I'm legally blind. Well, I wasn't always. I was considered the one with the good eyes in my family. We had 5 people in my family, in my immediate family, and 3 of them, my mom, my brother, and my sister, were all legally blind. And then about 18, I started noticing that I too was headed that way, though I did have a license, at 16. My dad and my parents were thrilled because my dad was the only driver. Well, as we went through life, it turns out that we have over 20 people in my family with this same visual disability. It's called rod-cone dystrophy, or at least that's what they're calling it now. And we were told at one point we were the only family in the country to have this. My mom just always called it it. So, you have it. And so she would watch me as I was growing up and watch for little signs and say, I wonder if you have it yet. And well, anyway, I got it. So anyway, that was later in life, and it's fine, and I've lived with it. But I do have a daughter, and I watch her. If she squints, I think, do you have it? And then, and I have grandsons now, and we're watching them as well. And but I do have one story that I told yesterday, and it always sticks in my mind, and I just think it's kind of a humorous family story. Is that my in my family we deal with having a visual disability with humor, and so we would always get together and tell stories of what we did, what we bumped into, what parking meters we said hello to because we thought they were people, and things like this. So my cousin, who is my age, told me at one point, we came home for family reunion, and she was driving. Now this was after I had stopped driving. I stopped at 25 when I almost hit one of those flagmen on the road. I thought, oh, I should probably not be driving. And he looked very scared. And so I decided I would stop driving. Well, my cousin said she kept driving. And I said, how are you doing that? Because I knew she had at least the same vision I had, if not worse. And she said, oh, I always keep my daughter in the seat next to me. And she tells me what's coming. So I said, okay. And so she lived in the same town, and I don't know if she traveled them, but she kind of knew where the stoplights were and where the stop signs were. But she's always counting on her daughter, and her daughter at that time had to be little. I'm starting, little. 4 or something. And so then and then we met, anytime we talk, I'm still driving, yep, Carrie's still helping me, she's still, telling me what's coming. And so then, years later, we're at another family reunion, and we're talking, and I said, are you still driving? She said, yeah. She said, well, now my grandson's. I have him over there telling me what's going on. But she says, sometimes he gets really mad at me, so he just won't tell me. So, I always say then, last time I saw her, are you still driving? And she said, no, I had to give it up. I'm like, what, you were going for the great-grandchildren? But anyway, so she did stop driving, and that's a very good thing for that city, I think. And anyway. So this is my family, and this is what we do. The other thing that I just found out recently is my nephew, who lives in Philadelphia, is doing a one-man show called Cones, because he has rod-cone dystrophy, and he is, apparently it's a really cool show, and he's going around to campuses. So if you ever hear of Cones, his name is Morgan Andrews, and I have not seen it yet, but I would like to see it. So anyway, family. Moving on from my family, though, then I went on with life, and I continued. I got accommodations in college, undergraduate and graduate. I was a non-traditional student in some of those times, and then I'm now 30 years in higher education, over 25 years in disability education, and have moved on with my life, and I just keep going. And I said the print just keeps getting bigger. And so that's what happens here, and that's why I have so much. I also have, I just want to tell you if I keep hitting something, okay? I have a clock out here, but my clock's not on anymore. So. But you know what? That's okay. I turned on I see the time. Okay, got it. Okay, I have to now do the math while I'm talking. Okay, so. Getting back to the Americans with Disabilities Act, or even disability, 1 in 5 Americans have disability, so it's 20%. and 11% of college students have disabilities. And we were kind of doing the math, and if you look in your own campuses, do you have 11%? I don't think 11% at any of my universities, and I've worked coast to coast, from Philadelphia to California, and I don't think any of them had the 11%, but I think it's that they did not all disclose. I mean, I'm sure there were more there, but it's the ones who come through disability services, so it depends what statistics you look at. When the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed, there were about 45 million people with disabilities in the country, and now, 25 years later, 57 million people have disabilities in the United States, according to the U.S. Census. So, students with disabilities are not someone else's problem. And one thing that we all don't want to think or say to a student with a disability is, oh, disability services will take care of you and your needs and your accommodations. Because as we all know, disability services does help provide or assist in the process of providing accommodations, maybe coordinates it, but it's the responsibility of all of us to include all students, including students with disabilities. And what it is, I call it a shared responsibility. So we're all in this together. So as advisors, how do you ensure effective communication and inclusion? So I was thinking about models of disability. And some of you went to the sessions last night. And so I know, and I cannot see you, but I can hear you, sort of. So if you will applaud if you did go to a session last night. Okay. So that so remember when you talked about the models, and you did a little matching exercise on models, and the rest of you can attend these today, right? These sessions. So anyway, then I don't want to give it away. But there are models of disability. And as I was thinking about the models of disability, I was also thinking about the models of academic advising, at least those that I'm familiar with. Dr. Susan Jones, Dr. Nancy Evans, and others inform us about models of disability. And one model is the medical model, and that is where we look at disability as a deficit, something we need to fix, something that is wrong. It is it's an issue that needs to be fixed, and is the onus of the person with the disability. That reminded me of the prescriptive model of advising, where we are fixing or giving the student just what the student needs, the schedule, that type of advice, looking for classes and go on with our lives. The minority group model of disability focuses on the oppressed and marginalized groups, and it can also, though, look it can be a method or a type of support. It can lead to support and camaraderie. So people can, as a minority group, as a group of people with disabilities, can see each other as support. So not all people with all disabilities are alike. And another thing, when I went to my ADA training back in 1990, it was national training of 150 people with disabilities. We were selected to go. And I remember in that room of 150 people, there were people with all disabilities, all kinds of disabilities. And the people who were deaf and sat there with the interpreter, and the people who were blind sat here, but we all needed different things. I needed low light, the person next to me needed a whole lot of light. I needed magnification, the person next to me after her needed, used a monocle. And so then there were people who used wheelchairs, but the people who used wheelchairs needed different things than the people who were blind. And then there were the people who were on oxygen and they needed something else. So anyway, we kind of joked and said it's the dueling disabilities. Because the people, that was another thing, the people who were blind, let me think about this, the people who used wheelchairs liked curb cuts. You know, curb cut on curb we all use, universally designed, that we use for wheelchairs, strollers, our suitcases, or anything rolling. Well, and then the people who were blind were not all that thrilled with curb cuts because they would, instead of feeling for the curb, we were, you felt for the slope. And anyway, again, dueling disabilities. So it is, we call it a minority group model because the group as a whole of people with disabilities can be oppressed and marginalized, but it doesn't necessarily mean all disabilities are the same. That reminded me, though, of the developmental approach, the medical model, the minority group model reminded me of the developmental approach of academic advising, in which we do focus on the whole student, and we focus on the student's identity, and recognizing that one size does not fit all, and that students come to us in all different developmental phases in their life. Finally, there are two other models, and one is the social construction model of disability, where the onus is on society to break down barriers and make the world inclusive for people with disabilities. And in the social construction model, it defines, society will define disability based on the barriers it puts up and takes down. Another one is the social justice model, and that is where all people are treated with respect and dignity and first-class citizens, and we listen to the voices of the people with disabilities. Both of those models reminded me of the appreciative model of advising, which is the most student-centered approach of student-advisor interaction and inquiry. So I think that thinking of the models that you have learned and used and have been trained to focus on really complement the disability models, and kind of putting those two together, I think, work really well. A simple formula that I've found, which comes out of my own research, my own dissertation 20 years ago, and I just want to say, yes, you can actually use your dissertation at some point in your life. Most of us think we have to. Oh, are you kidding me? I want to put it on a shelf and never look at it again. But pull it out and you might be able to use it 20 years later. My formula is the words or the themes that came out of that dissertation. For effective communication and inclusion, can be fostered through respect, comfort, and awareness. Very simple, very, I feel, simplistic, and yet I interviewed students with visual disabilities, college students, and those were the themes that continue to emerge. Respect me. Treat me with respect. Treat me like you would anyone else. Follow the golden rule. Comfort. Not meaning comfort me, but they said be comfortable around me. Show comfort. Ask questions. Act like you would with anybody else, only maybe be aware if there are certain things I might need or ask of you. And the third one is awareness, and of course that is education. And every student I talked to said, do you have training for faculty and administrators, or other students? And this was back then, and I said, that's a good idea. I mean, we really do need to incorporate this. So respect, comfort, and awareness. As you will see in the ability exhibit next door, in the ability ally workshops, that respect, comfort, and awareness are our theme. And that's why I'm saying you can use your dissertation years later, because it seems that that was and is the theme of what we do in building and developing allies. Checking time. So during my experience as a disability educator, I continue to teach disability competency, and it is my hope that I teach, and more importantly, model disability humility. One of the things that we have been able to do over my experience at St. Louis University in the past, I've been there 10 years, and in the last 5 years, we have been able to develop what is now an Ability Institute. And it all started with a project in one of my classes. I teach disability in higher education and society. It was a class I developed. It is now required for our master's students and elective for our PhD students. And the master's in student personnel administration, not all master's students, that'd be good. But it is something that we're trying to get on the radar. And one of my students developed an exhibit, or an idea for an exhibit. And she did a PowerPoint, and she did her major project, and went on her way, or thought she was. And then that's when I said we really should make this into something. We should make this into a national traveling exhibit. And we did. And so in 6 months, we were able to get some funding, and we now have 2 national traveling exhibits, one that you will see next door. And we also have developed the Ability Ally, and we've gone coast to coast with the exhibit at over probably 50 institutions now. And thanks to Fort Hays State University, we are here for several days, and we're very happy to be here and happy to celebrate the ADA with them and with you. And then we also have an Ability Ally workshop that is international. We've gone to Ghana and India and Spain, lots of places around the United States. And we have now what houses all that is the Ability Institute at St. Louis University. And we're focusing now in our college, our school of education, on disability education, where we have undergraduate degrees in special ed up to a PhD in disability education. So as we have grown, we've been able to incorporate our, also I was going to mention a K-12, we're working on a K-12 edition, and we have even been able to, yeah, she's still there, hire an assistant director, Alicia Abbott, who you will see around here, and she's up here in the front, and who has been instrumental in moving us forward, because that is what we needed. And this is all student run, by the way. Everything at the Ability Institute is all developed by students and now a full-time person, professional. She used to be my graduate student, and we keep going, and I keep calling her a student. I graduated a couple of years ago. Okay, so how do you go about developing respect, comfort, and awareness? We talk about how we can become allies, and that I think is the key. How do you become allies with your students? And part of what we're doing today is this is huge, because the awareness and the education are 2 major steps. And the third step is developing skills. So learning things about becoming an ally, person-first language, universal design, what it means to be an ally, what it means to communicate appropriately and comfortably with people with disabilities. That's the key. And then the fourth step of the Washington Evans model is that you act. And act and then practice. So not only do, but then continue practicing and then learn by trial and error. That's what allies do. But trying to be comfortable around people with disabilities is the key. And I think, and I've worked with my students for years on this, and we've tried different things. I said, really the bottom line is talking to people with disabilities, meeting people with disabilities. We can read about it, I can lecture about it, you can watch videos about it, but to really talk to someone. So I will have guest speakers come in the class. I will, we do first-person accounts where they do read first-person accounts of people with disabilities. One of their assignments is to interview a person with a disability. And that takes some time, because they have to figure out go back to the question, who do I know with a disability and who can I interview? And do they even know they have a disability, or do they even identify as someone with a disability? So when we think of allies, we could be 3 different kinds, according to an Edwards model, and that is we could be an ally for self-interest, where we care about other people, one person, other people, and we're really looking out for them. It comes from a place of care. We could consider ourselves an ally for altruism, where we look at the big picture, we want to make systemic change, but we are not really working with or talking to that much the people with disabilities, but we believe we can make change. Or we can lead to, and I think we aspire to become, allies for social justice. And that is where we actually bring the people with disabilities into the conversation, helping make decisions, respecting what they say, and listening, and not worrying about if we're called an ally, but just that we truly are, and we're bringing them to the table. Told you there were a lot of pages. So in your sessions, small group sessions, you will learn about person-first language, which I mentioned, inclusive language, not using negative terms, the old terms like handicapped, and derogatory terms such as lame, moron, crazy, words that we hear, retarded, words we hear a lot, trying to keep negative language out of our vocabulary and working. And I think if we work from a place from person-first language, then it is not offensive, it is more inclusive, it is more universally designed. Of course, there is identity-based language that goes back to that minority group model, and there will be people who want to identify themselves as disabled or as blind. If they said, I'm a blind person, or I am a deaf person, and that is entirely up to the person with the disability. So there will be different philosophies, different thoughts about that. But I think in general, if we use person-first language, that would be an inclusive, common language to use. Also, you'll be hearing about universal design and tips for making your work, your programs, your curriculum accessible to all students, so you don't have to worry about the student who needs a particular accommodation. That it's all students, and you can, easy ways are to change your